We're back with another riveting episode of It's Not That Simple. Today's topic, investigative journalism. Today's guest, Mariana van Zeller, an award-winning journalist. Now, you may know that Mariana was born in Portugal. She's best known, of course, for her role as host and executive producer in Trafficked with Mariana van Zeller on National Geographic, a groundbreaking series where she goes inside some of the world's most dangerous black markets and global underworlds. Over the course of her career, Mariana has reported from over 80 countries, and she's covered topics such as drug cartels, arms trafficking, cybercrime, and migration. Her fearless, human-centered reporting has earned her a series of awards, including a Peabody Award and a DuPont Award as well. Her work really highlights both the risks and the importance of investigative journalism. No doubt about that, and we're going to be talking about that, breaking it all down, and we're going to do it with Mariana herself, who joins us now live from the West Coast in the United States. Mariana, bem-vinda, welcome. It's fantastic to have you here. It's not that often that we have a Portuguese guest, actually, so congratulations for your phenomenal achievements. Investigative journalism, we're going to break it down, explain why it's not that simple. We know it's not, but in your own words, I wanted you to tell us why.
Because it takes time, it takes resources, it's not easy. It's unfortunately declining. I mean, you think that at least on television, which is my medium, you see less organizations out there willing to devote these resources that are necessary to telling these important stories. And I think that, podcasts have sort of taken the place of the traditional media. You're seeing more podcasts out there that are willing to do this kind of work because in many ways it's easier and cheaper for them to do so. But it's incredibly important. I mean, investigative journalism is all about the pursuit of truth. And truth is important if we want a working and healthy democracy.
I would say truth and facts are more important now than they've ever been because there's so much noise out there. You mentioned podcasts. Podcasts obviously are based on personalities. They're based on opinions. And Mariana, I think now, again, more than ever, it's probably tougher than ever to tell the difference between facts and opinions because everybody is bombarded with so many voices, so many different perspectives. When you talk about the importance of investigative journalism, do you think it's more crucial now than ever before because of this landscape and all this noise that's present in that landscape that we live in?
Absolutely. I mean, we're more and more being bombarded, as you said, by news, that is not coming from credible sources, where a lot of people, I think it's something like 70% of young people in the United States, if not a bigger number, they're getting their news essentially from social media. And that's troubling because these are not credible sources. The majority of them are not credible sources. They gain likes and views because for when they get attention. We're living in the attention economy. And I actually would say that more than attention, we are somehow living in the rage economy. It's not just about getting attention, but in some ways you'd see some of the loudest voices out there are voices that are sort of inciting rage in many ways. And that's really dangerous. And I believe it's a real reason why we see how this country and, the world at large, unfortunately, has become as fractured, as polarized as it has.
You mentioned social media, and when you talk about that medium, it's obviously a medium where there's not a lot of time needed to consume and to digest, right? It's about being quick and being first rather than being right or being accurate. And nowadays, information has become so much more disposable when you scroll through it and you really don't spend enough time to really analyze it. Yet your series, your shows continue to be and have continued to be very successful. Why do you think that is? And what do you think is the role of the longer pieces of journalism and the investigation that goes into it and the storytelling that goes into it? How have you been able to compete with this phenomena of what's quick, fast, and light?
Because I do believe that there's a lot of people out there that want to consume, storytelling and news and contextualization of our world. stories that matter. I think that it exists out there, that people want to see this, but that unfortunately, I think that a lot of people that decide what should be in the news or not in media organizations around the world, they are not as optimistic, and so they don't take the time or resources to invest in this kind of filmmaking, this kind of news shows. I think we've been successful because we have given people, the show Trafficked is all about black markets, right? I've devoted the past 20 years of my life to investigating these black and gray markets, which are an estimated 35% of the global economy. It's what economists call the hidden third. And they have a huge impact on our lives, whether we're talking about guns or drugs or immigration, scams. We're talking about trillions of dollars annually that are part of these black and gray markets. And again, with huge impacts on our lives. And yet you have whole news organizations out there who are devoted to analyzing every up and down of the legal economy, but very few people trying to understand this illegal economy. Not only why it works the way it works, but who are the people operating in these black markets? And that's what I've devoted a huge part of my career, and that's what Trafficked is about, is trying to gain access to these worlds and to these black market operators and sitting down with them, not with judgment, yes, with holding them accountable, obviously, not condoning what they do. If I'm talking to a trafficker, an assassin, a smuggler, a scammer, but I think it's way more important to try to understand why they do what they do, try to get to the root causes than it is to just come with judgment, which is what I think we see so much of nowadays.
That leads into a topic I wanted to get into, which is access. Your success depends on access. And how do you convince a lot of your subjects, a lot of the people you interview, to feel safe enough or to feel secure enough to give you access? How does that part of investigative journalism work? So there's obviously a huge part which is research. Once you get the research mostly done, at least when you're starting the process of your storytelling, when you start approaching people, how do you get them to say yes?
Yeah. It's definitely the hardest part of my job. And I think we make it look simple. I have an incredible team, by the way, who works hard on this access as well. But I think we make it look simple because at the end of the day, it's crazy the amount of access we do, right? Whether we're doing a story about, fentanyl or illegal streetcar racing or rehab scams, whatever it is, like we actually get access. We speak to romance scammers. All the people that you think are living, in very far away hidden corners of the world. And we actually get to sit down with them and see a little bit of their world. So sometimes I have people who think the show is fake because it's how is it possible that we're getting this access? But I think what people don't see is the amount of work that goes into getting that access. We're talking about months, sometimes even years. We're talking about traveling all the way around the world to meet with people who initially said, yes, they would be willing to be on camera, and then they decide they don't want to. So we have to start from scratch. I always say that we get, hundreds of no's before we get one yes. It's hard. At the end of the day, I think people speak to us. The ones that agree to speak to us do so because of impunity. In a lot of the places of the world that I report in, for example, Sinaloa in Mexico, there's a lot of impunity. There's police corruption. People don't really see a downside to speaking to National Geographic, a well-recognized brand. I think it's also ego. People want to boast. I remember speaking to somebody who was sort of the best money counterfeiter in the world. He made the perfect 150, $20 and euro bills that looked exactly like the real thing. And he was the finisher. He was the one who finished every bill to make it feel and taste, look, not taste, feel and smell and look like real dollar and euro bills. And when I asked him, why does he like to do what he does? And he was like, I love it because I'm the best at what I do. And his family didn't even know he does this, doesn't know that he does this, So we give an opportunity with a mask and a distorted voice to boast about what they do. And then I think the most important reason that people talk to me is because everyone wants to be understood, right? It's a very human condition. And I give people an opportunity to do so. I tell them I'm here with empathy. I'm here to try to understand why you do what you do. And I really think that is one of the main reasons why people talk to us.
Well, obviously now it's easier for you to get access. Can you just say, "Don't you know who I am?" And they probably know who you are, and that helps. And that helps the process. But how long can you mention? Sometimes it takes a while to get access. I mean, how long will you wait, and how long does it take really sometimes to tell a story when you have the pressure of the deadlines to put out, the episodes from the previous seasons?
I mean, sometimes it takes years. I mean, there are episodes that we pitched in 2019 for season 1 of Traffic that we ended up only doing in season 5 of Traffic because we only got access in season 5. So yeah, it takes a long time. Pre-production for every story starts about 3-4 months before we even hit the road. And so there's, and that's not just phone calls and emails, it's actual travel to go and meet people, to get face-to-face with people. And again, just getting used to being rejected again and again. Both myself and my team, we just know that's part of the game. And we have to stay hopeful and really believe that eventually somebody's going to agree to talk to us.
How do you know when you've kind of reached a dead end and you should stop pushing? And can you give us an example of that, maybe?
I don't. I'm really bad at that. I'm known to push buttons sometimes. So, for example, in Sinaloa, when you're reporting in Mexico on cartels, not in Sinaloa, everywhere in Mexico, if you're reporting on the cartel, and I've been told this many, many times, that the one question you're never supposed to ask is what cartel they belong to. And yet, if you see my stories repeatedly, when I remember in season 1, we did a big story on gun trafficking, how American guns are ending up in Mexico and all throughout Latin America and actually fueling the violence there. And we were meeting with one of these guys who sells guns. He's a big gun distributor to the cartel, to several cartels. And when I was asking him which cartels and what cartel he belonged to, it got dicey. And a lot of times this happens. Things get dicey. But I asked the question. I maybe push a little bit more than I should. A journalism professor of mine once told me a quote that I love, and I took it to heart, and I use it all the time in my journalism, which is, there's a line in journalism that you never want to cross, right? But you have to be sure that you come back with chalk on your feet. And I love that. You make sure that you're there. You're over the line. You're not crossing it, but you're on top of that line every time you can. If you want to be doing, if you in the search for the truth, and if you want to be doing journalism, the kind of journalism that I like to do.
But the thing is, you mentioned that things can get dicey. I mean, is there a fine line between dicey and dangerous? And how do you deal with feeling insecure? Because I can imagine that there's obviously a big element that you want to chase when you're doing these reports, which is the adrenaline of getting the story and of finding out more and unraveling what you want to unravel. Yet at the same time, you need to stay alert because there can be danger. And even if it's not danger during that interview, it can be danger of them telling you something they were not supposed to and then threatening you over it, I'm guessing. I mean, is that true?
Absolutely. And we're very careful we don't start filming anyone until we actually, before we even turn on the cameras, I will show them a photo of what they look like to make sure that they're masked the way they want to mask, that there's no identifiable objects or anything that identifies who they are. And I tell them, look, at the end of the interview, if there are things that you're not comfortable because you believe it's dangerous for yourself, because ultimately, if it's dangerous for them, and if something happens, if the police were to come and raid that place and arrest them that day or soon after, that would be a problem for the person, but essentially it would be a huge problem, not just for me and my team, but for the journalists on the ground, they're called in our profession, they're called the fixers, who are the people that we rely on. They are the unsung heroes of our profession, as I say, because they're the people that we contact if we're doing a story in Mexico, in Thailand, in Vietnam. We call a local fixer, producer, who usually, shares their knowledge, their sources with us. And they are the ones, we have the privilege as journalists to come back to our homes, but they're the ones who are staying on the ground. So if things don't go well, they usually don't go well for them first. being able to protect people's identities and locations is incredibly important for us. However, shit hits the fan all the time. Mike Tyson famously said, plans are very nice because we make all these plans before we go on the road. So plans are very nice until you get punched in the face. The unpredictable happens all the time when we're in the field.
There's obviously pressure that you put on yourself to try to get the truth as much as it will be revealed to you. Have you had instances where you have a truth that's too big to tell? I mean, is there cases where you have pressures also, whether that's, I don't know, other executive producers or network or whatever that may be, and say, look, we can't get this out there? I mean, how does that work?
Not so much. Obviously, working for National Geographic, it's owned by Disney, and they have an extensive legal department that goes through every single word.
Okay,
and
that's interesting. Yeah,
like frame that comes out, right? So we go through an extensive legal review. I mean, many rounds of legal reviews. And sometimes there are bad actors out there. We did a story about a rehab scam, like a person here in the United States who is promising rehab to people, but really he's just running a healthcare fraud scam. And, on the backs of some of the most vulnerable people who actually do need help. And other stories that we've done where we know there's a bad actor and we want to go after them. And yet our legal department is very careful because they don't want to be sued. We've been threatened with lawsuits constantly. It hasn't happened yet, just the threat. We haven't been sued. But as a journalist, obviously, because we're not lawyers, we want to go a little further and we're more willing to take those risks. But that, I would say, has been sort of the only walls that we have hit.
You've obviously had a long and distinguished career now, award-winning career. Looking at your path and the big moments and some of the defining moments, what drives you now? Is it the same thing that drove you then, at the beginning and through the path that you've been going on? Because obviously the thrill is different from when you start to where you are now with the experience you have. So as journalists, you're driven by a question, by an objective. Is that still the same? Has it stayed the same?
It's a good question, Pedro. I like that question. It's interesting. I think that at the beginning, when I started, I wanted to be a journalist since I was 12 years old. And to me, initially, I went to Columbia University's journalism school. And after that, I think the idea of having a career where people would pay me to travel around the world to, satisfy my own curiosity was pretty amazing. And just the idea that could actually be a viable profession was crazy. And so that was my goal, was I need to find people who are willing to pay me to do this because it seems pretty amazing life. And eventually, once I started having that life and started being, more successful at it, I would say that eventually you want more people to start watching the stuff that you're doing. And eventually you want the stuff that you're doing to actually have an impact. And that has been, I know that we've done stories that have had an impact, but it's not every single story we do. And we spend months, sometimes even years crafting these stories. So I think the frustration is now that, okay, we're putting out these important stories about, again, like real things that have impact on all our lives, and why aren't people watching this and changing this? Why am I not being contacted by politicians, who want to figure out how to make this better? Yeah. So that's, I think, the goal now.
As you look back, are there any particular stories that have had a big impact on you? And I know it's difficult to pick because obviously you've done so much, but are there stories that really left a mark on you and from a human perspective, and it changed the way you saw the topic, and also a way that it can be resolved or unresolved?
Yes, absolutely. Immigration, I would say. It was the first story that I did for an American news outlet. It was a story that we did about the death train, La Bestia, el tren de la muerte as it's known, which is a train that takes immigrants, Latin American immigrants mostly, but also people from around the world, from southern Mexico to the northern Mexico border with the US. And it's a cargo train. It's very dangerous. People ride holding onto the train. A lot of people fall off, die, get amputated. It's really horrific. And it was the first story we ever did for an American channel. And since then, I have continued reporting on immigration constantly. We did an episode for Trafficked, which was about the human trafficking part of the immigration. So we spent a lot of time with coyotes and these coyote kingpins that are responsible for bringing, thousands, if not tens of thousands of people to the United States, undocumented people to the U.S. And that is a story that, immigration is very is close to my heart, I think, because I've spent so much time with these incredible human beings, with really inspirational people who are living in fear in their own countries or can't provide, food for their children, and do this incredibly dangerous journey to be able, to live a better life and to provide a better life for their kids. I think there is no more, it's impossible not to understand why they do what they do. And to then see them be, villainized in the United States by, our current president and several politicians is really heartbreaking, because I don't think they've actually spent time with these immigrants and with these families and women and children who are making these journeys. And I think once you do, yes, are there bad people trying to come into the United States and coming here illegally? Absolutely. Are the vast majority of people like you and I and many of the people that criticize them, who are just human beings trying to have a better life for themselves and their families? Yes, they are. And yes, do we have a broken border system? We do. But that is the fault of the politicians. We should not blame, and we should not carry that blame onto the millions of people that are trying to come here just for a better life. And the hypocrisy of all of this is that we actually depend on these people. Like, the economy of California would collapse if we didn't have these undocumented migrants. We so easily accept the how important they are for our economy and the growth of our economy at the backs of their hard labor. And yet, we so, again, easily turn our backs on them and decide that they are to blame for everything that's wrong in this country. And then, we're seeing the raids that are happening here in my city, that it's heartbreaking. So immigration is always going to be an issue that's going to be very close to my heart.
Demonizing immigrants is obviously a rhetoric that has become more popular, not just in the US, but around the world, with an increased polarized world, and it's very close to a far right position when it comes to immigrants. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I understand that, Pedro. I understand that there are, a lot of Americans, Portuguese, European people who do not have the same opportunities nowadays, the same, they can't afford a house, they can't afford healthcare, they can't afford to send their kids to school. That is a real issue. And these are problems that should be solved by our government. But I think the tendency by our current president and unfortunately many politicians in Europe as well, is to point the finger at the most vulnerable of people, because that's the easy target, right? Because it's easier to blame than it is to make the system work for everyone, right? Let's figure out, why is it that so many people can't afford a house now when they could 30, 40 years ago? Why is it that 20 million Americans can't afford healthcare, and have to buy their prescription drugs on the black market because they can't afford the prescriptions, the life-saving prescriptions that they need? It's incredible. It's insane. And the richest country in the world, and we have 20 million Americans that have to buy, fake pharmaceuticals from India and Mexico. That makes no sense. So people are hurting, but that is the fault of the government and not the fault of the millions of people, all around the world who are just like you and I, and who just want a better life for themselves and their family.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to what you were saying in the beginning of our conversation, where, you touched on the fact that it's a lot easier to gain media attention if you're creating rage, or if you're creating, some kind of fear. And that's been obviously weaponized by several politicians around the world. There's no doubt about that. You mentioned how it's been for you to interact with the immigrants that you have an opportunity to interview and document. How has it been for them? I mean, do you stay in touch with any of them? Do they tell you what kind of impact your reports had on their lives, or on their missions, or on their on their goals?
Yeah, some of them, I stayed in touch for a long time with the two main characters from the Death Train episode a story that we did back. I reported on that. It was 2006, and I stayed in touch with them for a while. One of them was a kid called Guillermo. He's from Honduras. He had taken the death train. He had fallen off the death train, had lost an arm. I met him when he was at a clinic recovering after being amputated. It was horrific. And a few days later, I was taking the train because my husband and I, we were working together at the time, and we both took the train for a while to see how dangerous this journey was. And Guillermo shows up on the train as well. He was trying again to make it to the United States. So this, he had already lost an arm.
Wow.
He almost died. And yet here he was again trying to get to the United States. I think if that story doesn't tell you more about resilience and desperation, I don't think what else will, right?
Mm.
But and so I stayed in touch with him for a while, and he never made it to the United States, and I lost contact with him, unfortunately. But then the other case was Maria, who was also on that train, who had been, a victim of violence, abuse, had children, was seeing how difficult it was to raise children. She was 23, 24 years old, and decided to do this very dangerous journey so she could send back money to raise her kids, with the idea, with the dream that one day her kids could come to America and reunite with her. So as a mother myself, knowing what that means, separating from your children, knowing that you're going to take this dangerous journey to go and live in a country that you don't know, and being apart from your kids, again, it shows you a lot about resilience and about desperation, right? And yeah, I mean, these are stories that will always stay with me.
Last question before we move into our quick fire round. We touched on some of the challenges that journalism is facing these days, whether it's the short attention span, whether it's the lack of ability of the audience to tell the difference between the truth and facts, propaganda. It's a complicated landscape out there. Also, you have influencers and content creators posing as journalists. It's really, again, very difficult to be able to trust or know who to trust. When you have a look at so much has changed in our lifetimes, in the years that we've worked in television, surely, where traditional networks are now struggling to maintain an audience. They're struggling to stay on cable. It's different. More people are now getting there. As you said, their source of information is now more social media or YouTube. Anyway, it's a little bit of a chaotic picture out there, to be honest, when it comes to news and entertainment and the consumption. You mentioned the attention economy. The consumption of content is really complicated at the moment. So if you were going to look into a crystal ball and look at the next 5 years, where do you think the place of investigative journalism is, and how do we continue to keep it relevant?
It's so interesting. It's hard for me to tell. Look, I am starting a YouTube podcast, podcast that's also going to be on YouTube, and I'm doing so because we've done 5 seasons of Trafficked. The mandate at National Geographic has changed, unfortunately, and they're not renewing it for more seasons. And I strongly believe in the kind of investigative journalism I do. And I strongly believe in the importance of sitting down with people and having long conversations to understand, who they are, why they do what they do. And there's a real opportunity for me with the contacts that I have from, years of working on this to continue doing this kind of work. And so I'm doing it on YouTube and hoping, and I'm not the only one. There are a lot of journalists that started new channels on YouTube and are turning to YouTube. And I think what it gives me independence, right? I'm not at the mercy of the Disneys and the Nat Geos of the world, right? I can do the work that I do, that I believe I can do responsibly. But not do it for the attention. I'm not doing quick videos just to get people's attentions. I'm sitting down and I'm contextualizing an issue and, and giving people a platform and space and time to open up to me. And I think that's important. So it's difficult to know exactly what the future is. I think that AI is a real threat to all of us. I mean, I think it's also a great opportunity for all of us, but I think guardrails are very important. And we're living in an incredible, fast transformation. It's happening really fast. And I think that whoever out there can tell you what the next 5 years are going to look like, that person.
They're probably lying, right?
The genius. It's not me.
Yeah. AI, yeah, that's a topic for a whole nother conversation, especially when it comes to dealing with information and news and telling the difference of what real and what is not. Okay, let's wrap this up with our quick fire series. So I've got 4 questions for you that I'm going to ask you to answer in one word or in one sentence that we ask all our guests. The first one is, what is one personality trait that a good leader could benefit from having, and why?
Empathy, 100% empathy. It's a real reason why I think that we should have more women in power, whether at companies, as businesswomen, or as politicians, particularly as politicians and as presidents, because I think women have more empathy than men do. It's part of us, and I think empathy is incredibly important, particularly now in this moment in time.
What is the biggest challenge that humanity is facing today?
I think it is right now, it's a fight between social media and AI. I think AI, as we all know, is potentially going to lead to mass unemployment. It's the truth, it's the reality, and we have to figure out how to overcome that. Right now, I would say, if the answer is now, within the next year, I would say it's social media and what it's done to our political environment.
Yeah. If you could change one thing in the world by, magic right now, what would that be? I would say give everybody an extra dose of kindness. I think we're missing kindness in the world. And I think part of it is because of the rage economy. But I think kindness is very important. I think we should, we should be, and I think that's something I'm proud to say, it's something that my Portuguese family taught me, that we should always be seen by how we treat not the people above us, but the people with less power than we have. And so that's the work that I do in these black markets. I spend a lot of time with the people we consider the bad guys, and I think showing them a little kindness and empathy doesn't mean I condone what they do or don't hold them accountable, but I think that showing kindness and understanding is important for all of us. And finally, what's the most important learning of your life and career?
I think that it's the fact that even the bad people are people just like you and I. They're mothers, fathers, neighbors. They're people that, because of inequality, the vast and growing inequality that exists in this world, had to resort to a life of crime. And that, for me, has given me a lot of hope in the world, because I see that they are actually redeemable. I say this often, but the fact that through all my years reporting on black markets, that no matter how far I travel to the edges of our society, that I can still find people that are relatable and redeemable has given me enormous hope about humanity.
Those were really long sentences, but we'll let it slide, Mariana.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you so much for enlightening us and kind of uncovering what some of the intricacies of your career and life have been. I think our audience has learned a lot. So thank you, and good luck on your new podcasting venture as well.
Thank you so much, Pedro. And it's called The Hidden Third if you want to tune in.
There you go. There's the plug. It was fantastic to get to speak with one of the top investigative journalists out there. And I think it's a bonus as well that she's Portuguese, since we're a Portuguese show. So happy about that as well. So big thanks to Mariana for breaking it down and explaining why investigative journalism is not that simple. See you again soon.